Good evening, everybody. This is Don Woolley from Sahuarita, Arizona. It's Wednesday, August 7th, and we are broadcasting live from our studio in Rancho Sahuarita, and we're getting a call in from Jim O'Connor, so I'm going to jump on the phone right now. Hello, Jim.
Hi, could you see me now?
I can't see you, but that's okay. We'll just make sure your camera's turned on.
Oh yeah, there's no light up there now. Isn't that unusual?
Yeah. Well, that's okay. We can do the interview just with sound, so that's no problem. Let me get you
Let,
to.
let, let me just go to that device thing one more time and see if I can bring it up.
Okay, we'll give you a chance to do that.
Update driver, disable, uninstall, search properties. Maybe it was properties. The device is working properly. Okay. But apparently it's not working properly. Go figure. I don't know how to take it beyond that.
Well, that's okay. We'll just do the interview
All right.
with sound on. Yeah, I got good audio. If you have good audio,
Yeah, I think so.
okay. So let me start out by asking you about. I know you attended called into a meeting today with the Senate candidate who's running against who will run against Martha McSally in the primary. And ladies and gentlemen, we have Jim O'Connor on the phone. He's live, but we had trouble with video. So, Jim, go ahead and tell us a little bit about this candidate, who he is, and your view of the whole thing.
Sure. As just to refresh everybody's recollection, Martha McSally was defeated in last year's general election by Kristen Sinema, the Democrat, and McSally was committed to fight that for what was expected a lot of voter fraud here in Maricopa County, conducted essentially by Adrian Fontes, the Arizona county recorder. But that effort was abandoned rather promptly, and candidly, it appeared that with Senator McCain's death, that Governor Ducey would be making an appointment to complete the 2 years of his seat until the next general election. That's the one we're a year away from now, November of 2020. So McSally didn't bother to fight because she was going to be appointed United States Senator, and that was cheaper and easier thing to do, and that is quite obviously what has occurred. Since that time, according to her potential contender, who did not announce today, but is taking more time to do a listening tour of the state, of the voters of the state. What was concluded, at least in my opinion, is that he's called out Senator McSally as not being a strong Trump supporter at all. And Martha McSally, sadly for her, by the way, is growing, or her reputation is growing, not being willing to show up at groups of voters, Republican voters, that where she's been invited, and she just cancels meetings. I'm sure she's very busy in the U.S. Senate, but this is a race, and if you don't have a competitor, you don't really have to show up because you'll wind up being the nominee by default. So a number of us statewide are very encouraged that a young man by the name of Daniel McCarthy is exploring the possibility of running against McSally in the Republican primary next year. Worst case is that his entry into the race sharpens McSally. If she's that good and that big and that strong, she'll be debating him and showing herself to the voters so that people can actually get behind her rather than just giving her a free pass to the dance, which
Yeah,
is what it appears she's working on right now.
right. And that's really a good point. I would think I would think that when she schedules anything her staff does, et cetera, that she would want to keep those commitments. Now, maybe once in a while there may be some travel problems, et cetera. But this time of year, the Senate is not in session, and neither is the House. They're all off running around the country doing their thing and campaigning. So I would think she would want to keep those commitments.
I would hope so. It makes common sense, but if she doesn't have to, she won't. So I'm excited that there's a potential competitor out there.
So does it sound like Daniel McCarthy is? You think he's leaning toward being in the race, or you don't know right now?
Well, his conference call today was probably a momentary disappointment to those who are passionately excited and keeping our republic as a republic, the way the founders envisioned. But he is up against the machine, a very corrupt machine. And I'm not talking about the Democrats here. I'm talking about the money and corruption in our Republican Party. So we have a candidate, kind of like a mini Trump in a way here, who can pay for his own campaign and make it happen, and with a lot of grassroots support behind him. But I think the term I heard one time in a strategy session was asymmetrical warfare. I'm not sure exactly what that is, but I'm sure it's something where you don't signal all your plans in advance to your opponents. So it's going to keep them guessing. And I like that. That'll keep them nervous, keep them guessing.
So is Daniel McCarthy? Is he a businessman?
He is a very young businessman. I understand he is 33 years of age, married to his high school sweetheart. I don't believe he's been to college, or if it was, it might have been as a working man and just getting college credits at night. He and his wife raised a family of 4 kids. He's now 33, so he's been married 15 years. He and his wife were in business together. They founded one company called Makeup Eraser. Being a guy, I have no idea what that is, but evidently they sell tens of millions of dollars of product to the ladies of the world. I guess he described that enterprise as a global operation, but it's all done here. It's created here in Arizona. So he's very proud about bringing jobs and bringing revenues into the state. And my sense is he's quite accomplished.
Well, good. Everybody, there's some news for you. Daniel McCarthy is thinking about entering the race for the U.S. Senate against Martha McSally, and I'm sure there are different views on this from other folks, but many see that as a good thing, like Jim does. So we'll see how that pans out. So, Jim, a little bit about your background. I know. I don't know if it's 3 years ago or 2 years ago, you ran for the AZGOP chairman in I would call it a disputed election, very close certainly, and and then after that, recently you ran for the Corporation Commission, and I think you were LD23 chairman at one time.
I'll give a brief background on that. In 2006, I've been an Arizona resident since August 1st of 2000. when I retired here from an investment banking career in Los Angeles for 30 years. And my wife and I, and then very young son, moved to Scottsdale and have really enjoyed this state immensely since our arrival. That young son we moved with is a political science major at U of A down in Tucson, not too far away from you. And he will be, God willing, graduating in May of next year. So I'm very proud of him and his accomplishments. He too has been working in the political arena for the last 4 years. And as I mentioned, is a poli-sci major at U of A. So that's for future generations. But in '06, I was asked to get involved as a precinct committeeman in my legislative district and began going to meetings at that point. And for the last now 13 years, hard to believe it's been that long, I've been volunteering full time in the Republican movement, in the grassroots Tea Party constitutional movement within the state. And in terms of leadership, I was elected maybe 6-ish years ago to be the chairman of LD 23. My claim to fame in that job, I had such a competent and dedicated group of volunteer leadership on my board. They freed me up to do what I did best, and that was to recruit 135 new precinct committeemen in that 15-month period between elections, and I appointed them. My joke about all of that, sadly, was that I took 300 people out to breakfast, lunch, and dinner over a 15-month period of time. My closing ratio is pretty good with 135 that became PCs. But the sad news for me is I gained 57 pounds during that exercise, and I've never lost an ounce of it since. So it's been a heavy burden to carry around for the last 6 years. But
Well,
maybe this year I'll get something done about that.
that's good. Yeah, I think you were LD 23 chairman the same time I was after the redistricting, I was the first LD2 chairman for a couple of years.
Oh, great! Yeah,
Yeah, and
exactly. So
yeah,
that was a good experience. And then I had the privilege of being appointed as one of our 11 electors for the 2016 Trump victory, and got the privilege of being one of 304 Americans to actually cast the winning votes for Donald Trump and Michael Pence.
good for
And that
you.
was a privilege that is recorded. If my camera were working here, I'd show you what's hanging on my wall. Those documents, the Electoral College vote. It was awesome
Yeah,
and a great privilege.
that's great. Yeah, that is a good thing to hang on the wall, boy. That's terrific. So
Right.
so let's talk a little bit about. I talked with Ken Bennett a couple weeks ago. We had him on here, and I asked Ken about number one, the sort of the legislative session, what he thought about it in 2019, how the legislature did, and where we're going in 2020 with the 2020 elections in the state. Are we going to hold the House and the Senate? Are we are we playing our cards right? Are we ready for the redistricting question coming up? Are we prepared for that this time, where a lot of people felt we weren't ready in 2010? So maybe you can first get into what you thought of the legislative session this past spring.
I will, thank you. And the way I like to approach that is in two parts: the legislative session, and then the activity of the Republican Party, which is all about getting Republicans elected to office,
Right.
not only through the primary, but over the finish line in the general, which is the all-important race. Because if we're not elected, all we do is get to watch, and we watch our republic going down for the count. So addressing let's take the party first, and let's look back over the last 6.5 years. We had Robert Graham, chairman of the party, for 4 of those years, and then his designee, Jonathan Lyons, served as the Republican Party chair for the 2. That was the election that you referred to a little while ago that I challenged Lyons in.
Right.
And I don't want it to sound like sour grapes, so I won't redress and dig that horrific experience up. But suffice it to say that the lack of leadership that these 2 young men demonstrated when they were at the helm of this party for that 6-year period, we moved from seats in the legislature where we had supermajority in both houses. Republicans controlled our state Senate and our state House by supermajorities. I believe it was 3/4, 75% in the Senate and 2/3 in the House. So we were in Fat City. It was a good and very comfortable place to be. With the party politics that were played by those men, and by the way, if they had credits, I'll be quick to claim whatever their credits may have been. But in this case, they reduced, you can talk to our elected state party treasurer, Robert Lettieri, who ran with me on my ticket, was elected. He ran again. He served, he won, I lost, and he served under Lyons and kept Lyons out of financial trouble, thank God, and thank Bob Lettieri. But any Republican is free to call Bob Lettieri, and he would be thrilled to discuss line item detail about the budget, and specifically, he did a study and a report on the donors. The donor base of the Republican Party under Graham and Lyons were cut in half, which really meant, now they'll tell you their numbers were the same, and that's true. They did have a lot of money come through, but that money came from the RNC, the Senate, the National Republican Congressional Committee, and the Senate Republican Committee, all of the systems, and the Chambers of Commerce, and the Koch brothers, and all of that money, the money for favors, the money for trade, that's what was coming through our party. And they control that with the blessing of Senators McCain and Flake, and Ducey is part of that cabal as well, our current governor. So they ran the party essentially into the ground. It had no gravitas. Thankfully, by an act of God and the will of some very astute individuals, at the January meeting of this year, January of 2019, the party overwhelmingly elected Kelly Ward as chairman. There were 700 state committeemen out of 1,230-ish that voted against Jonathan Lyons getting a second 2-year term. So God is good. He delivered in that election, and we now have a chairman who is working diligently to build the party, to grow the party with new strategies and new ideas. And let me share one of those with you, if I may, that she brought to the table that I think is smart, just simply smart. Many, many, many Republican primaries are contested. And with the attitude that the former leadership brought to the party, I like to call it the lying, cheating, stealing strategies. The candidates that would show up to run in the primary, it was all about backbiting, personal destruction, It was god-awful cesspool politics. So Kelly has come up with a new strategy where she is a state party chairman and encouraging county party chairmen and all district chairmen around the state should take a new attitude. Republican leadership within the party is the face of the party. Each of you are the logo of the party, the goodwill on the party's balance sheet. So what we're going to do from now on, according to our chairman, Kelly Ward, we're going to be loving on and embracing every Republican that enters a Republican primary. And why should we do that? Well, here's one reason. The chairman, state, district, and county can be invited to every candidate's fundraiser or friend raiser. And what can they do with those? They're going to meet Republican voters and Republican donors. And if there are, let's use CD2, for example, I think there may be 6 or possibly 7 candidates. If all 7 of them are embraced by the party, they're going to feel good about being a Republican. So as we get close to the finish line, or even through the primary, if they're all treated with respect, with dignity, if their supporters are treated with dignity, if they're listened to and appreciated for being Republicans, it takes a lot for a man or a woman to put themselves up for public office.
That's right.
You're laying it down, whether it's volunteering inside the party or running for public office, and I've done both. And the public office shot, as you suggested earlier, was on a statewide basis. It's draining energy-wise, and it's draining financially. Right?
Right.
And it is indeed all of that. And for every candidate that steps up and tries, they ought to be appreciated, not undermined by their own political party. So then if you were the state chairman or the county chairman or the district chairman, and you have 4 candidates in a primary, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and you've treated them all well, do you think you're going to have enough goodwill that maybe you can pull them all together after the primary to get behind the winner? I put money on that that's a good idea. Just because it's smart and it's fair and it's good, and we're going to look better and feel better about our fellow Republicans, instead of lining up to take a guy who's willing to give $1 million worth of his time, maybe a few $100,000 of his own dough over a 10-year period of time, and pouring his heart and soul to keep the republic. And leadership in the state party hates you because you're not the kind of Republican that does what you're told from the top down.
Yeah, that's
I'm preaching to the choir, and I'll keep quiet.
No. You're doing great. You're exactly right, and I think that's a really, really smart thing she's doing. All of these candidates, you get through some of these primaries, and it just makes your candidate stronger and helps them more when the other candidates who lose the primary will join in the fight against the Democrats. And so I think that's smart. And the other thing I think Kelly's doing, and you can correct me, is what she's going to do, and what I think is happening is she's looking for more statewide small donors rather than some of these, as you called them, the Koch brothers, et cetera, types to donate to the party. Try to get people to donate to the party. So that's the other good thing. So
well, when you're the 500-pound gorilla, whether you're APS, SRP, Intel, or one of the big unions, or whatever the Koch brothers, when you move 10, 20 million bucks in advertising money for a party, for a proposition, for several candidates in a state, you don't do that unless you're getting something back for that, because you're really representing not individual dollars, but a corporate interest.
Sure.
You got to get a slice of somebody's pie in exchange for that. Whereas if you've got a broad base of small to medium-sized donors that are supporting the party, all of a sudden the party becomes more respected because it doesn't need to be uh, dependent or overly dependent on the corporate interests or Chamber of Commerce stuff. And that's a good goal. It's a good path. She's on that. I myself joined the Reagan Circle that Kelly created. It's a donor list. I think the commitment is you have to give at least, well, there are different levels. You can give $1,000 a year for a 2-year cycle, but that was my way of personally showing support for Kelly and what she's doing. I needed to be behind her and set the example. I don't know what the total is. That fellow who used to be down in Tucson, Rodney Glassman, is heading that effort up. Because I met Rodney through the Corporation Commission race, and you can say a lot of things about Rodney, but he is a salesman. He can raise some money. So if he's helping Kelly raise money to make our state party stronger, that's a good thing, and I'm appreciative of Rodney's efforts.
Absolutely. And just to let everybody know, we we're having, the Republican Club of Green Valley Sahuarita is having this roundup event in September 21st, and the headliner in that event is Kelly Ward. We're getting Kelly to come down here, and it's a fun event. People get to mingle and meet people, and you get to meet Kelly and talk with her. So she's been to it before, and she really enjoys it. And so we invited her and Mike down for that. The club did, and Patty, my wife, is treasurer of the local Republican club. So and I actually put together the website for them. So anyway, we're looking forward to that, and Kelly can tell us more about what's going on. So what do you think about, I guess you believe, Jim, that this effort by Kelly Ward is so important because going into 2020 and keeping the state in Republican hands in the state legislature is so important. And Democrats would disagree with that, but we would hope that, I'm sure you believe that her efforts are going to strengthen the chances of doing that.
Well, I certainly the prior model again, and not to harp on these guys, but I just, as you were asking the question, I was recognizing that I didn't give the sleigh ride downhill. Not only can Bob Lettieri validate that the number of donors were cut in half, the money remained the same, may have even increased. But what that means is fewer people are more muscle on controlling the state party. If they're getting more money from a few people, they don't have a lot to say because they're so dependent. Not only the donor piece went down, but we went from supermajorities in the House and the Senate to where we now have the Senate by 2 votes could change it, and the House by 1 vote. So Republican majorities are still there, but by an inch, by a hair. So the leadership, the lack of leadership in the Republican Party for the 6 years prior to Kelly Ward was pathetic, to say the least. Now we have a chance to rebuild that, but we need to do it. We can't allow people to sit on the fence. If you are going to stand for keeping us a republic form of government, you've got to become a Republican to do that. We have got the best, most conservative Republican Party platform since Abraham Lincoln. And that was done, I learned over the weekend before last, by a large number of wonderful Christian conservatives that served on the platform committee of the party. And we have at least one great patriot in our state, Andrea Kadar, up in Cottonwood, who gave a report to us on that platform committee. I had not known that until just recently. So kudos, and wonderful things are happening when we get patriots to stand up and each do our small part. And Kelly is providing through the party the atmosphere, the attitude, the openness, the inclusion to get that done.
I guess another thing I want to mention is the candidates for each of the LDs around the state. Are you hearing anything about new candidates, new people getting into any of the races that are encouraging, or are we struggling to find candidates to run against, to run in each of the LDs, even the LDs that might be controlled by the Democrats? I think the smart thing is to get Republicans to run in those districts and get the word out.
Agreed. So let me tell you what I see to date, and this is the quiet summer before the election cycle really gets
Exactly.
into high pitch later in the fall of this year and all of next year.
Right.
So Dr. Bob Branch, who you may be familiar with, he almost tied Frank Riggs for superintendent of public instruction.
Right. Let me mention, I'm sorry to interrupt, Jim. Let me mention
Sure.
that Bob Branch, we're going to talk with him next Wednesday on this live stream. So yeah, we
Well,
know.
that'll be a treat, and I'm not going to steal his thunder, but I want to tee up his remarks. He has created. He's sitting out this cycle as not a candidate himself. He's created a new. I don't want to misstate it. It might be a political consulting firm, and he's focusing on what I ran on last year as a clean election candidate. He is trying to field 3 new Republican candidates in every legislative district statewide and help them promote their candidacy, get their $5 clean election contributions, which is heavy lifting for every Republican. And I'll let him explain how he's going to do that when he's your guest. But he's got a very exciting program to help advertise, promote, and even if none of our people get elected, if we have 1, 2, or 3 people, there are 10 Democratic districts we don't even run candidates in.
Right. Right.
So there's no messaging. There is no Republican messaging going on in 10 of our 30 legislative districts. This is preposterous. And I know that Kelly and Kelly's husband, Mike, have been strong advocates for this clean election candidate strategy. So I'm very grateful that Bob, who's an absolute prince of a man, he is absolutely one of the finest salt of the earth people out there. And I got to spend a lot of time with he and his lovely wife Adele on the campaign trail in 2017 and 18 as we ran for our respective statewide offices. So I endorse Bob and his program mightily. So pay attention, get involved, and get engaged. And if you can talk any of your club members or precinct committeemen down there to get on the local school board. I sat in on a John Birch Society meeting last night, got the education of a lifetime about what the government has done to our kids, and I walked out of the room informed but ill, with a pit in my stomach for the monstrous behavior. So in my closing prayer, they asked me to close the meeting. There were over 100 attendees. I was very pleased that so many people were out on a hot night in Mesa. And I opened the prayer with, Father, forgive us all for neglecting our country and our children to get this nationwide in such a deplorable state, such a deplorable, despicable state.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I know we are working hard down here in the Sahuarita area. We watch the school board very carefully, and you know, we kind of hold their feet to the fire too. Once people get in there, we had I call her a Democratic Socialist, ran this last election for the school board and did not win. And her big idea was to televise the town meetings. That was her goal in life. She didn't have any position on anything else. So I didn't
Well,
I didn't quite get
well,
that, but
she didn't need a position because their agenda, the communist agenda,
oh yeah,
is already installed.
right.
Kindergarten through, I don't want to talk about that. I'll become ill again. So
Yeah.
I don't want to revisit that.
Well, so I appreciate that introduction to Bob Branch because that means that we really invited a great person to be on with us next week. You know, so we started out with Ken Bennett, the former Secretary of State. We had Zach
Right.
Taylor, who's a retired border patrolman. We talked about the border issues, went through everything, and next week we're going to talk to Bob Branch, and of course today we have Jim O'Connor on the line, who's who I'm pleased could join us. I know, Jim, you said, we talked earlier today, you're going to be up in Tucson tomorrow. And one of the things you're going to do is go to the Brandon Martin panel tomorrow night at the Hilton Hotel. Would you like to tell folks? I'm not sure what time it begins. I know the Hilton East is on Broadway, right past a street called Prudence. There's a Culver's on the corner, so if you come down Broadway going east, you can't miss it. And tell us what time that starts tomorrow night. A little bit about that panel.
What I know is that it will begin at 4:30. It's a 4:30 to 6:30, and then there's a dinner after. And Brandon recently got the endorsement of an old baseball player from the Diamondbacks up here, Kurt Schilling.
Kurt Schilling, right?
Has endorsed him, and he's down for that fundraiser. So I'm going down to support Brandon. I supported him when he ran 2 years ago, and am very excited for his candidacy. I do know that there are other good Republicans in that race, but again, we can't be telling people they ought to drop out or get in or support somebody else, because that's a very personal calling. And the same is true with this young man. I've had some people saying, why do we want to let's protect McSally? Well, I don't want to protect McSally. I want McSally to be a better senator.
Right.
And she can be a better senator if she fights in a primary. I haven't seen her in a fight yet. She walked away from the Kristen Sinema thing, and she also debated Kristen Sinema. Anybody who's interested in learning a great deal about debates would be advised to watch that thing, draw your own conclusions. I won't bias you with my opinion on it. I did watch it last year.
And you and I talked earlier about Martha McSally and Kirsten Sinema, and it was always my feeling that Kirsten Sinema defined herself in the Democratic primary, and people bought into that messaging. And after that, Martha was unable to change that for whatever reason. One of them was effort itself, but she should already be starting to define Mark Kelly in this next election and who he really is and what he believes in, and do it now. And I know that the primary coming up, but like you said, that's part of the fight. Part of the fight is doing that, and Brian McCarthy should do the same thing if he gets in the race.
Yeah, Daniel McCarthy.
I'm sorry, Daniel McCarthy,
Yeah.
right?
Right, indeed. So, one other thing I'd like to just mention. So I ran for AZGOP chairman, and then the following year I was elected president of the Arizona Republican Assembly, which is it's our state organization, part of the National Federation of Republican Assemblies. And then from there, I launched my campaign for corporation commissioner, and that was a wonderful experience. By the way, in that race, with the exception of two younger men in it that seemed to like throwing snowballs at each other, it was a very, very dignified contest. We actually debated in 52 forums. It was almost one a week. Some weeks there were two or three in the same week. And we jokingly said we had each other's speeches down or talking points down somewhere in the middle of that process. But it was very dignified. We didn't beat each other up. And I'd like to think my participation in that race influenced that, because I certainly set the tone for that, taking the high road rather than the low road. So it can be done in Republican Party politics. I'm absolutely convinced. This year, I'm working behind the scenes. I'm excited I'm not in party leadership, so I don't have to love on every candidate in the primary, even though they're all Republicans. I'll encourage elected party leaders, district, county, and state leadership should be embracing them all to build the party. And you build the party by being good Toastmasters and good, warm host and hostess when you show up at events. Not picking, save your favorite. You're a human being, you'll have a favorite, but keep that to yourself till after the primary. And if you're that big a deal, write them a check for the max limitation, the max limits that you can for your favorite, and don't give $1 to the other guys, but give a big smile and a hug to everybody, because that builds the party. So this year, in addition to backing a couple of very excellent candidates, I am spending my time since March as a member of the AZGOP, or as we now call it under Kelly's reign, the Arizona Republican Party Bylaws Committee. And Kelly has, although denied it on the Maricopa County briefs, we've talked about her holding a special meeting, which was pretty much routine prior to 2010. Again, we stopped the special meeting. Special meetings are held in essence just to do bylaws. So the committee would come together 9 o'clock on a Saturday morning, 1,200 people or 800 people and 400 proxies, that kind of a thing would be typical, and would hold a meeting, no speeches, just business. What's the business? Let's adopt bylaw changes. Why do our bylaws need to be changed? Well, because what the two prior chairmen did and failed to do, what the bylaws were silent. So we need things in the bylaws that will reduce abuse, reduce proxy abuse, reduce credentialing abuse, because they're not fair. I mean, our governor signed and our state legislators, Republicans, voted that ballot harvesting is illegal in our state, except within the Republican Party. There you can go proxy harvest all you want. And then you swap your proxy for a ballot, and then you go to these meetings and you see men and women running around with 30, 40, 50 lanyards around their neck. And who are they voting? What these 50 paper proxies told them? Not on your life. They're controlling the vote. They're manipulating, skewing the vote. Happens on both sides. I don't want it to happen at all, but we've got a strategy in the bylaws to limit proxies, and that'll be recommended to the executive committee, and then the executive committee will bring that out at the state party meeting for that to be adopted. We're also introducing language that will give the party the ability to fire any elected PC, whether you're a state chairman, county chairman, district chairman. You're breaking the rules, you're out. And unless and until we have, by the way, our state Senate can do that, our state House can do that. The people of Yuma elected, what is it, LD? I don't know, the LD in Yuma that comes up into the West Valley in Maricopa, Don Shooter, you know that name?
Right.
He was serving in our state legislature. It was his fellow, House members that removed him from office, even though the voters of Arizona got him in, okay? We can't do that right now in our own party. We can have back in the Napolitano days, there was a full-page ad, Republicans for Napolitano. 1,000 names were proudly displayed. That's when we had a primary. Oh, not a primary. This was a general with Len Munsell running. No slouch, by the way. President of Center for Arizona Policy for 10 or more years, and he's subsequently the president of Arizona Christian University. Substantial guy. And they railroaded him because they couldn't tell him what to do. He was his own man. And unless you do what you're told, you're not going to get that vote. So 1,000 Republicans proudly displayed their name in a full-page ad in the Arizona Republic. But it may have had more readership in those days. I didn't even see it around anymore.
Yeah, that would be a hard thing for me to do, to put my name under Janet Napolitano.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Let's talk about
Let's get a good Democrat in office. And she didn't do us bad. What did she spend? $9
trillion,
$9 billion of our $7 billion.
Right. Yeah,
we had to hawk every state office building to get that debt paid off.
Right. I told you Frank Antinori came to one of our night meetings in June, and he was a state senator.
Oh yeah.
During that time, and talked about that a little bit. How he first he used to go and talk about how he went in to fight with Brewer about the budget. Wrestled with her and wrestled with Jan on some things, and it's a real tug of war to keep to obey the law and balance the Arizona budget. And we talked with Ken Bennett about this year's budget, which is. This is the biggest budget Arizona has ever had, $11+ billion, and he is really concerned about the state retirement system and some things that are going on there. I urge people to go to YouTube and search on the Sahuarita Tea Party and watch that interview with Ken Bennett, because it's pretty alarming what's going on with the state retirement system. So, Jim, we've talked almost 45 minutes, and I wish you well. Good luck with your bylaws work, and I really appreciate you coming on tonight. Thanks so much for joining us. We apologize to everybody for the video problem, but that's okay. We had a good interview. Jim's a great guest, and we'll see you down the road, Jim.
Don, thank you very much. God bless you guys.
God bless you too. Thank you. We'll talk to you later.
Good.
So everybody, that was Jim O'Connor. We really appreciate him coming on, even though he had some video problems. His camera and his laptop was acting up. I thought he had it fixed, and then it failed him again. So anyway, what I'm going to do now is take a short break, maybe 5 minutes, and we'll be back in just a little bit. We hope you'll stay with us, and take care. See you in a few minutes. Okay, hi everybody, we're back. I'm going to bring you some program notes. We have the meeting tomorrow night, August 8th, and I believe Jim said this starts at around 4 o'clock, 4:30 with Brandon Martin. It's at the Tucson Hilton East Hotel on Broadway. And I know the cross street there is Prudence, which is just before, I believe it's Pantano. So it's past Kolb to Prudence, and maybe y'all would like to go down there and see the panel. I know he's got 4 people on the panel, and they're going to be talking about the Second Amendment. So, and the other thing I want to remind you of is the roundup coming up in September for the Republican Club of Green Valley, Sahuarita, September 21st. You can go to the website and buy tickets, or if you're on the email list, you'll be receiving emails where you can register for the event. It's at the Grill on the Greens in Canoa Ranch, and it's always a fun event. It starts at 5 o'clock. 5 p.m. and special guest is Kelly Ward, and also Justin Olson from the Corporation Commission is going to be there, and Brandon Martin is going to attend. So come down and meet all those folks and talk with everybody, and we hope to see you there. Now, one of the program note I'm going to bring you is I know some of the wives won't be happy about this, but tomorrow night is actually the second week of the NFL preseason games. So I didn't see anything televised nationally tomorrow night. They're all local television broadcasts. A couple of the games going on. Phoenix, I believe, is playing the Chargers tomorrow night in Phoenix, and I think the Denver Broncos are up in Seattle playing the Seahawks. So you folks might want to. Some of you guys might want to catch those games. There's a bunch of other games on too. You can go to you can search on the internet and find out the schedule for week 2. I think week 1, I think Denver beat the Atlanta Falcons 14-10. So anyway, other good news is college football has started. They've started practicing this month. Usually start around the 1st of August. They all play at the end of August, the first game. So that's pretty exciting. There aren't too many people that don't follow college football. I myself am a Colorado Buffalo, so and we have a new coach, and we're excited about this upcoming season. So Coach Tucker is a pretty amazing guy, and we're really interested in watching his teams play. We think we're gonna play like we want to see Colorado football played. So it's been a real disappointment the last few years. So anything else going on? I don't think so. There's a lot going on nationally. I know the president visited Dayton, Ohio, and El Paso today, and I hope we hope we get some of this out of our system that's going on right now with all this craziness. The president is he's going to do what he has to do to find a solution to this. We're confident in that. So some of it has to do with mental health, of course, and And some of it is we just need to be a little bit smarter about things. Now we're not for these red flag laws. Red flag laws are unconstitutional because they don't follow the due process called out in the Constitution. So, you know, that's just not the thing to do. I know even Governor Ducey has talked about that in Arizona, but we think that's a bad move. So that's about it for this week's show. We hope you'll join us next week. We're going to have Dr. Bob Branch on. Jim O'Connor talked about him, and Bob ran for state school superintendent. So we'll have an interesting conversation with him. He is really not happy with some of the things Kathy Hoffman is doing, and she's the one in the position now, a Democrat. So, and you heard Jim talk about Bob starting a group to recruit candidates in all the LDs and help them. So that's really a great thing. You know, we have 3 Democrats running LD2 right now, and they're all really incompetent and have done nothing in the state legislature. And they keep introducing crazy bills that aren't going to go anywhere, that mainstream Arizonas are not going to buy into. So let's get 3 people to run against them and get the message out there. The message is important. And then next year, of course, 2020 is the census, and redistricting follows, and that's going to be we're going to be a new LD pretty soon, and that's, you know, so the sun's going to come up on and the sun's going to set on LD2 and come up for the new LD. So okay, so I'll let you go, and we'll see you next week with Dr. Bob Branch. You all take care, be safe. If you're a concealed carry owner, our advice is take your gun with you wherever you go. I mean, wherever you go. Be able to protect yourselves, your wife, your family. Be prepared. And with that, we'll see you next week. Take care, be safe, and join us next Wednesday at 5 o'clock. Thanks for being with us. Good night.